Would Jesus have been called a rabbi? Well, yes, but a little bit complicated. One of the claims that some mythicists make, such as Christ before Jesus, is that there are terms and ideas within the New Testament that are anachronistic to the time of Jesus. Now, one of those is this idea that Jesus was called a rabbi, because according to them, the term rabbi didn't start until after the destruction of the temple. But is that true? No. Here's where it becomes complicated though, because the term rabbi doesn't mean the same thing throughout different time periods. So we can actually see the root of the word rav appearing in 2 Kings, and there it just means something like chief. But when you get to the first century, it's no longer referring to the same thing. Now, today, when we think about a rabbi, we think of someone who is really equivalent to a priest or a pastor, someone who has actually gone through some type of training. But in the first century, that wasn't the case. What the term rabbi meant was teacher, or maybe even master. That the term rabbi means teacher really isn't controversial. It's something that's widely accepted. And in fact, when we look at the New Testament, when we look at things that Jesus is called, teacher is something that Jesus is called not only in Hebrew, but also in Greek. So that when someone calls Jesus rabbi, they're just saying, hey, he's a teacher, shouldn't be controversial at all, and it's not something that's anachronistic in any way. The issue here is that after the temple was destroyed in 70, the term rabbi is used in a different way. It's kind of evolving at that time because Pharisaic Judaism, which becomes Rabbinic Judaism, has to evolve in order to survive. And at that point, we see the term rabbi take on a different meaning, something that's more formal. Here's the thing though. Jesus isn't the only Jewish person who's called a rabbi in that time period. In fact, someone who's really important to Jewish understanding, Jewish history, is also called a rabbi. This person is Gamaliel the Elder, who is also called a rabbi. Gamaliel lived in the first century, in the first part of the first century, and was associated with the Sanhedrin, and he was called rabbi. So, this idea that Jesus couldn't have been called rabbi really isn't historical. It's misunderstanding what rabbi meant at that time. It meant teacher or master. It did not have the formal meaning that it had later on. There are also a few other ideas that people say are anachronistic to the first century, and we will be exploring those in future videos, so let's take this ride together.